new thing. What's new is the attitudes towards disability and how they've evolved. So today I'm going to talk to you about how the technology has evolved alongside the ever-changing attitude, and I'm going to introduce you to something called the social model of disability. The earliest wheelchairs that historians could find depicted were on a Greek base dated to 525 BCE, though it isn't known whether that particular design was meant for transporting disabled and elderly people or if it was for noblemen. The next representation of a wheeled chair was in 6th century China. It was found on a tablet meant for printing. It was a very wheelbarrow-esque design and not really meant for the disabled person to be using on their own. That idea of not being able to use it on your own continued through many centuries. King Philip of Spain had his rolling chair. The first real self-propelled wheelchair was invented by Stefan Farfler, a paraplegic watchmaker, in 1655. And not much is known about what happened for wheelchairs between 1655 and the invention of the bath chair. John Dawson invented the bath chair in Bath, England in 1783. It was a big kind of, basically like a wagon that was steerable, and it was so heavy it had to be drawn by either a horse or a donkey. And it was very uncomfortable, but it remained the standard for like 40 years. Then we moved into the Victorian era and we got more self-propelled wheelchairs. Things are really starting to change. People are starting to see that disabled people don't have to rely on you for everything. So now you have chairs with push ribs. And this was the way wheelchairs were till about 1932, when the first foldable metal wheelchair was invented by the Herbert Everest Company. They were foldable, easy to transport. They were everything that all other wheelchairs hadn't been. And by allowing this more mobility, more people and more disabled people were able to get out of their houses, and more visibility came up, and slowly that made change. In the early 50s, after World War II, that's when the first powered wheelchair came out, and it was originally invented for veterans. And it was basically just the Herbert Everest wheelchair with a battery pack. It wasn't anything fancy. And those chairs really kind of remained the norm until the 70s, and in 1990 we got the Americans with Disabilities Act, which really started to skyrocket the technology because people were seeing more and more capabilities from people with disabilities. So what the Americans with Disabilities Act basically does, or is supposed to do, it often fails. There's a lot of loopholes within the ADA. It's designed to protect the rights of disabled people, make for accessible infrastructure, and protect from discrimination. Discrimination towards disabled people in particular is called ableism. It's not a stigma, it's called ableism. So the American with Disabilities Act came in, and people started getting mainstreamed in schools. They started being able to access grocery stores, and minds started changing. And with that, we have the chairs we have today. We have the Quickie Q7, which is actually what I ride. And then we have the Tylite TR, which is made out of titanium, whereas what I ride is made out of aluminum. Titanium's a little lighter, a little stronger. It's meant for the people who do more in their everyday. And then that's an example of a modern power chair made by a company called Quantum. They're very high-end, very comfortable power chairs. And because we can have had more exposure and social ideas have changed more, we now have things like specialty wheelchairs. You can play basketball or rugby or tennis in this one. You can do wheelchair racing in this one. This one is a chair by a company called Box Wheelchairs. It's called the Beach Bomber. It is the only wheelchair designed for beach going that can actually be propelled by the user. Most other beach wheelchairs are PVC and big plastic balloons. And then this is called a sit ski. It's basically a bucket with a ski rod underneath it, and you use it with in combination with two poles to ski just like you would if you had access to your legs. It's actually something I'm going to be looking into trying this winter. And the future is here. There's more and more things coming out. I introduced you guys to the OGO earlier this semester. It's the self-balancing, hands-free wheelchair that was designed off of a Segway, basically. This one, I forget the name of the company, but it is made entirely out of carbon fiber, and it weighs about 10 pounds at base construction. And this is the exoskeleton. Now, there's a lot of controversy that goes with the exoskeleton because some articles about it like to say it will be the end of the wheelchair. But the end of the wheelchair is never going to come because of one simple fact: not all disabilities are the same. These exoskeletons target spinal injuries where there's no movement there, and that's not the only reason that someone would use a wheelchair. I use mine for chronic pain and joint instability. Walking with an exoskeleton would probably cause more dislocations for me than walking without an exoskeleton. So a lot of people like to think there will be an end to the wheelchair, that one day there just won't be any visibly handicapped people. And that's an incredibly ableist thing to think, because that's erasing people, and we are people first. What the social model of disability is, and what I've been trying to get at through this speech, the social model of disability says that a person is more limited by their society's ideas of their limitations than by the limitations themselves. That's talking about infrastructure that gets in the way, lack of technology that for communication. It's basically where society falls short on making life accessible. That's it.
Okay, let's open it up for